There are an estimated 10 quintillion bugs on Earth. And all of those bugs need to have sex.
Sex in bugs is fascinating, gruesome, counterintuitive, ridiculous in its complexity, ridiculous in how extreme it is, and most people know nothing about it.
They do things like we do, but they do it in ways that are really different than the way we do it.
Spiders' sperm transfer organs are not connected to their gonads.
It's a perfect opportunity to say, hey, here's how evolution works.
Underneath that is a spermatophore. It's just a little blob of sperm, and he threads it into her reproductive tract.
Here's the gift. That's what he was giving her in exchange for copulation.
You know, the best answer to almost any question is it's complicated.
I guess when I think about bug sex, I wonder why everyone isn't studying it, because it is just fascinating.
One of my favorite moments in science, when you think you really understand something, but really you don't understand anything.
The first thing to understand about studying bug sex is how you actually study bug sex. It starts by being a kind of a bug voyeur.
These two look.
Yeah, although they're just kind of sitting there.
Yeah.
This is the part of the evening where I always panic and think that nothing's gonna happen.
I mean, I've watched a lot of animals not have sex.
Sitting out here at 5 a.m., like, please do something.
You want to swap them out?
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I see it right there.
We are starting to get a little nervous now, but we haven't decided it's time to move on.
If you don't hear them by now, then...
Taryn says we got to move on.
I'm trying to get her out so you can see.
The female has climbed on top, but in the wrong direction.
Yes. Nope, and now now it's over. The moment is gone.
We do a lab here in the animal behavior course, done it for years, and guaranteed students get a pair of tree crickets in front of them in the lab on a piece of flour like this, and they're going to see sex. Nature is amazing in what it generates in terms of diversity, and the same thing goes for the mating game in nature. There's just a wealth of different diversities out there that lead to the evolution of, as you say, all these weird and wonderful ways of doing it.
These tree crickets are having pretty common intimate relations for the bug world. The male calls to the female by rubbing his wings together.
That's his call, yeah. It's a trilling noise. She's attracted to the song, crawls up on his body.
But then comes the part where he transfers his sperm.
You see the spermatophore, a little white thing? A whole bunch of insects encapsulate their sperm in some way, and it's called a spermatophore. They're sort of ejaculating internally because they have to surround the ejaculate with this spermatophore casing. We entomologists like to call it spermatophore play. The spermatophore is like a turkey baster where the male winds a little tube into her reproductive tract, and then the actual bulb of the spermatophore basically squirts then the sperm into the female, slowly over the next probably half hour or so.
While the spermatophore is doing its job, the male needs to keep his partner's attention, so she just doesn't wander off, partly inseminated. So how does he do that? Well, there's this small gland just under his wings on his back that produces something she wants.
It's just like a little pit in his thorax, and it's covered by the wings. And then when he sings, of course, he lifts his forewings way up, and it's basically exposed at that point. And she's proceeding to feed on that little biological soup bowl, that little gland at the base of his wings. There's proteins in it, really important to her reproductive fitness. She lays more eggs, the more she eats. Probably like a little hors d'oeuvre for her. So the casing, called the sperm ampulla, is eaten by the female once it's drained. She just bends around, plucks it off, This gooey, sperm-free dessert that on some species it looks all the world like warm mozzarella cheese on a pizza. Insects are so diverse, and as the years go by, we're coming up with more and more novel systems, new insect systems that do bizarrely different things.
We want to think about how it is that males attract females in the first place. There's song, there's dances, there's chemicals, there's all sorts of different ways that males try to entice females to approach them or mate with them. We're actually looking for some really large cricket-like things, orthopterans, that make these woods sing at night.
Singing is one word for it. Can you hear that shrill vibrato noise? That's the call of the local crickets near Hinton, Alberta. They go by many names. The Greek is Siphodaris. It's also called the Great Gregg. But we're going to go with its best nickname, the monster haglid. And when the sun goes down, the males get really, really loud.
They make really loud sounds that are different from regular crickets in certain ways. They're higher frequency, and they seem to invest a lot of energy in producing these sounds. Generally speaking, in these kinds of animals like crickets, the males make a sound and the females follow it to find the male, and then that's how they start courting and potentially mating. But with these animals, the answers are hard to come by. So put a microphone close to the animal and measure it. They come in around 105 decibels. And for comparison, the fire alarm system in this building is ear-piercingly loud. It's designed to penetrate to whatever room you're in. And the fire alarm system is around 90 dB. I've got tinnitus in my left ear, and it's at this frequency.
It's one of those workplace hazards.
So they're really loud. But these scientists haven't been able to determine yet whether the volume of their calls is directly related to mating.
So it was really difficult in early studies of these guys to get the females to respond in a typical way. They didn't seem to pay any attention to the sound. It's not totally clear what information is carried in the sound. So we started studying what the hell was going on with that. You just take one of these out, you grab the bug, you put him in here.
And the jaws are fairly strong, so it's better to catch them in the container.
Marianne Andrade and Andrew Mason are a bug sex power couple. She's an evolutionary biologist, and he studies bug acoustics and behavior.
It's surprising how many people are part of a couple where both of them are doing some sort of research, working on the same types of critters. We were both interested in basically the libido of bugs. It's kind of a match made in buggy heaven, I guess. It's kind of...
Marianne and Andrew both teach at the University of Toronto Scarborough, back in Ontario. And they've drafted this crew to collect monster haglids in the Alberta bush. Monster haglids are big. They look like they're covered in samurai armor, not adapted for mating as much as for combat.
It turns out that the males have a really kind of aggressive territorial behavior where they basically claim a tree and sing from that tree. You get two males on the same tree at the same time, then they'll often fight. And one of them gets basically kicked out of the tree. A louder sound is a stronger defense. It reaches farther, more of your rivals are going to hear it. So that could lead to the evolution of louder and louder sounds if there's a benefit to being heard by more of your rivals.
If a male monster haglid can hear his rival's call, then presumably so can the females. But does this racket actually attract them?
It's possible that the broadcast from the female's point of view just needs to identify that the tree is occupied. So there is a male in this tree. If he's got a tree, he's fought off rivals in some sense to hold this tree. That's enough to make it worth going up and evaluating him as a possible mate.
This male monster haglet is following the mating script. He's done his bit by securing his tree, or in this case, his log. Now he'll call, and call, and call, hoping for a female to come along with an answer.
At some point, the female will show interest in a male, and then the male will start to do his courtship routine.
During courtship, the males will allow the females to chew on a set of fleshy pads hidden under their main wings. Inside those pads are a nuptial gift, a nutritious present that sweetens the mating deal. While the male transfers his spermatophore, the female feeds on his blood. But today, the females are either not hungry or simply not interested. The other male, on the other hand.
So sometimes when males are fighting, they'll start same-sex sexual behavior. I don't know why it happens, but I want to know.
In so many instances, the study of bugs and sex feels like a new frontier of science, even though Charles Darwin wrote about insect mating and reproduction in the 19th century. One of the most common answers bug sex biologists give is,
We don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what to compare it with.
Most of us don't know anything about them.
I don't know. I don't know.
This is Hilo, on the Big Island of Hawaii. It's a place where sea turtles share the Pacific shore with humans, and the small port city buzzes with daytime activity. But as night falls, a whole other world wakes up. These Pacific field crickets are wandering this urban lawn, looking for someone to have sex with.
I think one of the most interesting things about insects is that they're so different from people, and yet they're so abundant and so variable that almost anything you can find or think of an insect will illustrate. And I think what that helps us do is stop getting so hung up on the idea that life has to be a certain way, and that the way humans do things is the only way to do them.
Marlene Zook is an evolutionary biologist and a behavioral ecologist. And the Pacific field crickets have got her attention. Several years ago, on another Hawaiian island, Marlene discovered that a lot of the male crickets had gone completely quiet.
If you see a lot of crickets but you don't hear any calling, then there must be something wrong, because when crickets are out and you see them and it's night, they should be calling. But if you don't hear calling, then you shouldn't see any crickets. But I was seeing crickets, but I wasn't hearing any calling.
So what happened? Marlene learned that the cricket call for sex had become a form of fatal attraction. It wasn't just female crickets hearing the call. It was also being picked up by a parasitic fly that zeroed in on the same sound and dropped sticky, wriggling larvae onto the male crickets' backs.
And when they get onto a cricket, they can burrow inside, and then they start wending their way inside the body of the cricket while the cricket is still alive, and eating what a student of mine used to call the gooey bits. And then they'll gradually start eating more major organs, and eventually the cricket dies when the fly larva is big and it kind of bursts out.
It was a cricket's mortal dilemma: signal for sex, but risk getting attacked by a parasite. Marlene, her husband John Rottenberry, and her grad student Archa Thadi are scanning this lawn in Hilo, doing a cricket census.
Here's another female. You.
They're looking for male crickets whose wing structures have suddenly changed, rendering them silent. An evolutionary fix that prevents the flies from finding them.
It had spread incredibly rapidly through the population. Say 5 years, 3 to 4 generations a year, so we're talking at max 20 generations, which is really, really fast from the standpoint of evolution.
It is one of the fastest takeovers by a mutation ever witnessed by scientists. The flattened wings affected almost all of the male Pacific field crickets on the island of Kauai and about half on the island of Oahu. Now they're seeing if this mutation from normal wings to flat wings has happened here on Hawaii's Big Island.
Okay, give me a second. This is a flat wing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Wow. They weren't able to call, not because they were behaviorally refraining from calling, but because their wings didn't have the apparatus that's necessary for producing a song. These males that I was finding didn't have any of those structures at all, and their wings superficially looked like female wings.
This is a normal wing cricket. You can see the light reflecting off the swirling, complex wing structure that allows this male to call for a mate. And this is the mutation, a flat wing. You can see that it's, well, flat, and it's rendered this little male silent and a lot harder for a potential female mate to find.
This drastic change changes not just the male's abilities to sing, but it changes the female's environment that they are now in, because they don't know that there are all these males around them that they could potentially mate with because they can't hear them.
So what's interesting to me is that it's like the loss of a sexual signal, and that's quite startling because it would be as if all the peacocks in the world woke up one morning and found out that their tails had disappeared, which we would probably notice more than we notice the crickets.
At any given time, there are trillions of crickets alive on Earth, and yet none of them generates much fear in the hearts of humans. It's different when it comes to spiders. A lot of people simply can't stand them. But the world of spiders and sex is so fascinating, you might even forget that you hate them. If there is one thing most people seem to know about bug sex, it's that there are times when one of the partners ends up dead.
So in pop culture, the black widow is she mates and she kills, right? And they apply that label to humans who are murderers and etc. Well, in these species, males that let females kill them can actually produce more babies than males that try to avoid that outcome.
What you are watching is a red-black male doing what's called the somersault. After he has inseminated the much larger female, he flips himself into her open jaws.
If the female kills the male, she's less likely to mate again, and she also actually takes in more of the male's sperm to use to fertilize her eggs in the future. It's better for that male. You might make it easier for the female to kill you if her eating you actually can give you more eggs or give you an edge in competition with other males.
But just because the males of one black widow species offer themselves up as a post-mating supper, it doesn't mean all species do.
People tend to latch on to the really bizarre pieces of the behavior. So sexual cannibalism is lurid, it's kind of exciting and weird, but in fact it really doesn't happen as often as we think. There's some species in which when a female's really hungry, she'll eat a male, but in fact males can smell that they're hungry and try to avoid them. Here we are in my spider rearing room, which for most people is a nightmare, of course, but this is where we raise black widows and false black widows that we use in our research. So in this lab, we're really interested in understanding how unusual mating behaviors let us probe how ecology and evolution works.
At the University of Toronto Scarborough, Dr. Andrew Mason has rigged up this soundproof chamber to actually record the sound a spider makes twanging on a web. This male false widow is proceeding cautiously across a female's web. The strands act as conduits for sending messages. Just listen. Like a spider's version of Morse code.
The most basic piece of information he's signaling is his identity as a male of her species, and therefore as a potential mate rather than potential prey. Because one of the main sources of information they have is vibration in the web, and it's the same whether it's an insect that they're going to eat that hits the web and generates a vibration, or it's a potential mate that's coming in to signal his presence on the web. We use our laser Doppler vibrometers, which work by projecting a laser beam against a surface and then detecting the reflection of that beam. So it acts kind of like a microphone. You can connect it to a speaker and broadcast it as sound, and it's the equivalent of what the spider's hearing through their feet, basically through their vibration sensory organs in the web. The males actually grasp individual strands of the web and pluck them like a guitar string, and they do that with more than one leg at a time. And then they also do kind of whole body movements where they'll retract all their legs at once, and that creates a lower frequency jerking motion in the web that has a different pattern again. If the male is not, in some sense, careful about sending a clear signal of his species identity, there is a danger that the female will respond aggressively. And she is capable of killing him and eating him.
So the thing about black widow and false black widow mating is that it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous in its complexity. It's ridiculous in how extreme it is.
We're constantly talking about genitalia and having conversations, you know, at the pub about spiders' genitalia breaking. And so, yes, you definitely do have to have a sense of humor about it.
Yeah.
This beach is on the Sayout First Nation traditional territory, near Saanich on Vancouver Island. Catherine Scott did her PhD here under the guidance of Mediane Andrade.
Here's a widow.
Female black widows make their nests among the driftwood. Catherine and her partner, Dr. Sean McCann, have spent several summer seasons here, tracking the movements and behaviors of the local black widow colony.
I was terrified of spiders up until the first day that I started working with them when I was about 25 years old. I started working in the laboratory with black widows, and I immediately fell in love with them. As soon as I started to look more closely at them and to observe their behavior and understand their communication system, I've just found them fascinating. I got this tattoo as a gift to myself to celebrate finishing my PhD about the communication of black widow spiders. And so this is the underside of the female spider, and then this is the backside of the same spider, and it's on its tangle web. I can point out the female genitalia right here without having to open a book and talk about the different body parts of spiders. And if someone asks me about my tattoo, I can do what I call casual science communication, tell them all about my research, and get into a conversation about spiders, and hopefully can shift fear to fascination like it did for me.
The females construct elaborate webs around their lairs that work as both communication systems and traps.
She's pulling silk out of her spinnerets with her last pair of legs and throwing sticky glue onto the grasshopper to subdue it. And then once she's comfortable with the fact that it's not going to jump away, then she'll move in for a bite and she'll inject it with a little bit of venom.
So a male black widow needs to figure out how to not end up like that grasshopper.
Spiders tend to use chemical signals, and you can think of them like an airborne personal ad. The female emits this chemical cocktail that travels through the air, and males are able to detect that with sensory organs on their feet. And they can get information about the female from those chemicals and determine whether she's a female of the correct species, whether she's mated before, and even whether or not she's hungry, which is important for black widows. So they're not navigating using their sense of sight. They're navigating completely by smell. So the male will climb up some vegetation, and then at the top he'll pause and he'll wave his first pair of legs around like this, very slowly, and he'll kind of turn and wave the legs, and he's tasting the air with the sensory organs on the tips of his legs. And if he catches a whiff of a female's personal ad, that chemical signal that she's emitting from her web, he'll get a read on where that scent is coming from, and he'll move in the direction of the signal that he detected. And as he's moving around the environment, he's trailing a silk safety line behind him. We call that a drag line. And so that drag line silk ends up connecting the tips of the blades of grass or other vegetation that he's been climbing up to get his bearings. And so he leaves behind him sort of a silk highway connecting the vegetation. And other males are all doing the same thing. If he encounters that silk drag line of another male, he's just gonna run along it as fast as he can and eventually end up overtaking that first male or arriving at the web that he has found. And so the males are using this as sort of a shortcut to find females more quickly, arrive before the first male has had a chance to mate.
Back in the lab, a male looks like he might get a chance to have sex. He's still potentially in danger. At any moment, the looming female might make this a dinner date. But it's a risk he seems willing to take if it means his genes get a chance to move ahead one more generation.
The males have these appendages on the front of their body. They're sort of smaller leg-like appendages called pedipalps. All spiders have them, but in males, they're modified for sperm transfer. They often look like the male is wearing boxing gloves or mittens in front of his face. And so the male, when he is mature and he's just about ready to mate, he builds a special little web called a sperm web. He deposits a droplet of sperm onto that web, and then he sucks it up into his pedipalps, and he uses them more or less like turkey basters to then transfer the sperm into the female. Once he is on top of the female, they're in the mating position, he is ready to stuff the sperm into her seminal receptacles. His little turkey baster pedipalps expand and deflate and expand and deflate as he pumps seminal fluid into the female, and that can go on for about 15 minutes. And then finally, when he withdraws that embolus, the tip will break off. And if he breaks it off in just the right spot, it will block the opening to the female's sperm storage organ and prevent subsequent males from inseminating her. I can talk about the black widow males breaking off their genitalia inside of the females as literal cock blocking, which is a term that humans use, but we probably can't say on TV.
Now, you might be asking why the male would try to block his mate's genital tract after the deed is done. It's because the sex is not over yet.
That is the epigynum, it's called. The genital structure is located in here. So we cut around that to remove it.
The female black widow spider has 2 receptacles where she can store the sperm.
These structures are hardened, and they can hold sperm for the female's entire lifespan following a single mating.
The trick for the male, though, is to fill them both. If he only accesses one of them, another male can come along and fill up the second. And if he doesn't block the receptacle he did ejaculate into, another male could mix his sperm in there, too.
So this is sperm competition. When females mate with more than one male, the sperm actually compete inside the female for access to the egg. So it's competition one stage after mating, which is kind of amazing. So female success in an evolutionary sense depends on her having as many babies as possible. She will produce like an egg sac with 100 to 200 eggs twice a month for the rest of her life. We're talking about 10,000 or more offspring in their lifetime. And so when a male manages to mate with a female, even if he's killed, even if he never gets another shot, his reproductive output is actually pretty high.
So we've seen that when it comes to bug sex, the males need to employ different strategies to get the females to mate with them. Gifts, broken genitals, stealth, even allowing themselves to be eaten, all to make sure their genes make it through to one more generation. Pretty straightforward, right? Not so much. Just when you think you've got it figured out,
Yes, they will mate.
the bugs throw you a curveball.
When we look at the animal kingdom, in terms of typical roles, males are competitive and females choosy. That's most species. But there's a few exceptional species, and the dancefly is one of them. Danceflies they're kind of role-reversed in behavior. It's the females that are competing within these swarms for the males, and the males are choosing among the females.
Oh my goodness, look at this, Daryl.
Shit. My God. The swarms will be monstrous tonight.
Rosalind Murray was at one time Daryl Gwynn's PhD student. Now she's a biologist at the University of Toronto, Mississauga.
This is by far the best technique I've found for collecting.
They're here on the Credit River in southern Ontario, getting ready to take in a dancefly performance.
They're only sexually active during about 45 minutes to an hour at dawn, and then again at dusk.
The swarms always start really low, and then they move up as the light gets darker.
Oh, we got action, I think. Yep. We got the start of the swarm.
It is very wonderful to be able to describe these flies that basically look like they're dancing, and to think about this evolutionary puzzle that shouldn't exist and does. You have this beauty, and it's a bit bizarre.
This swarm is made up of female dancing flies. They try to attract and mate with as many males as they can.
The females are like little tiny peacocks. They flash wonderful ornaments in this swarm.
It's the ornaments that get a lot of the attention from boy flies and from scientists. The females show up ready to dance, inflating their abdomens and showing off their bristly legs, trying to get the most attention, not only to mate, but to get a meal too.
Males go off collecting what we call nuptial gifts.
The male going out over the river behind us, catching a bug. I'm bringing a small mayfly or a small midge or something back to where the females are swarming.
It's just a dead fly. So that's what he was giving her in exchange for copulation.
Her net's much bigger than mine.
The females aren't hunters, so the gifts of dead bugs are the only sure way they can eat.
It's a rough world. Only certain females will probably get sufficient number of gifts to be able to develop a good number of eggs.
So these females have swallowed air, they've inflated their abdomens, they're floating around with their legs positioned laterally along their abdomens. And the males will enter from underneath, and what they see is a silhouette of the female's abdomen inflated with all the lobes, and her hairy legs positioned around that abdomen. So they carry their gift up to a female of their choice, and then they exchange the gift with her in exchange for copulation. She will start eating it, and then they mate in what we call a flying triplicate, where the male is flying, carrying the female who is eating the gift. And so you see all three of these individuals, one on top of the other.
Oop, oop, look, oop. Oh, they separated.
They separated.
That was interesting. So
Yeah.
the male came in, coupled with the female. They came up, and then he just flew off. She wasn't good enough, I guess.
So from Darwin describing all these different sexually dimorphic species, we always think of the male as this flashy, bright-colored bird or mammal, the mane on the lion. It's always, always the male. And so in these dance flies, what's really exciting is that it's the female. You can see, too, that this female has invested a ton in ornamentation. So her legs are very thickly bristled. She's got extremely hairy legs, is another way of saying it. So you can see a bunch of them have fallen off there, and you can see the bristles.
All of that ornamentation, the inflatable abdomen and the hairy legs, is part of the female dancefly's toolkit for attracting and competing for males.
And that's really weird. It doesn't really make sense evolutionarily that it should be the female. It should never be the female. The female is already investing a lot in reproduction. She shouldn't be investing in ornaments. It should be at the expense, we would assume, of her babies. But if she's getting food gifts, so resources, while she mates, and having those ornaments means she gets more food gifts, then she can overcome that trade-off and actually produce the same number or more offspring.
But it's not as if female bugs just started behaving in a way scientists hadn't seen. Maybe it's because no one thought to study them before.
When I was studying at the university, I got specialized in animal behavior. And I went to the classes and I saw that everything was focused in males' behavior. We were missing half of the story. When I came for the first time in the lab, we have only one woman that was one of my supervisors, and all the rest were men. Fortunately, around the 90s and all that, something changed in science. Much more women started studying animal behavior. And we start finding things that were different. Studying and showing that females are very active, females can be more mobile than males, females can be the courting sex, and they can display very conspicuous behaviors during courtship.
About a decade ago, Anita was studying a species of wolf spiders called alicosas. She noticed that female alicosas were acting differently than other wolf spiders. The females seemed to be the ones out on the prowl for a partner, not the males. This wasn't in the science books. So Anita captured some potential mating pairs and put them in a terrarium. They immediately dug deep burrows in the sand and waited.
When I placed the female, I saw that the female went to the burrow entrance. The burrow entrance was closed. She opened the burrow entrance where the male was there waiting, and she started courting. She faced the male and started moving her front legs in front of the male, and the male responded, making some body shakes, and I said, whoop. And I remember the night that I saw all the first interaction, it was like one of my favorite moments in science. When you think you really understand something, really you don't understand anything, but you say, oh, this is the reason. Female behavior is completely different to most of the studies in spiders.
The coastline of Uruguay is a wild network of expansive beaches and sand dunes. The wildlife is stunning, from the larger mammals to the smaller bugs. On shore, this is spider country.
Spiders represent many things that I am very fond of. They are mysterious, they live in the dark, and many people hate them or are afraid of them. And you know, as a teenager, I was completely a rebel. And I think studying spiders is like being a rebel too. And showing that being different can be something nice and good.
It's late winter in Uruguay, and Anita's alicosas are out on the sand, leaving their burrows to hunt for food. Anita has just spotted a female scurrying into a burrow.
You saw her? I can see the abdomen of somebody. Ah, she's there. It was inhabited by a female. Probably she had mated there, and that burrow was constructed by her previous partner, a male. There is something like a male odor that attracts the female, and probably the second female was looking for a potential sexual partner.
Back in the lab, the alicosa male spiders have taken up residence in some terrariums.
In general, males that construct long burrows are ready for mating. But it depends on who visits him also, because remember, they are choosy in this species.
This is where the mating dance gets complicated. Ideally, the male will approve of the visiting female, and the female will like his burrow. The burrow is a nuptial gift, like the food gifts among dance flies or the glandular secretions between the crickets. In this case, the gift is a place to have sex and lay eggs. That is, if everything goes well.
She will start opening the burrow entrance and leaning into the burrow, and she will perform courtship, waving the first leg pair facing the male. Yes, they change positions. The male is on top now. Yes, they will mate. The female performs body shakings when she wants to have more ejaculations from the male. And the male responds. It's like they were talking to each other. In general, the male does not go outside the burrow. I don't know why he's doing this now. Oh, I think that they moved and they are mounting. When the male is ejaculation, you can see the hairs from their legs raise and go down. Every time they ejaculate, they raise. So you can count the number of ejaculations by observing.
Just when it looked like this was a successful encounter, disaster.
Oh no.
Mating turns into murder as the male suddenly decides to cannibalize the female.
Ah, no, no, no. He's a bad boy. It's crazy and it's magic also. It's better than watching any film, any movie. I'm always very emotional when I see the female like going around and being so active and initiating the courtship and approaching the males. In spite that they know it's dangerous. But attacking the female after mating, it was really weird.
There's no getting around it. Sexual cannibalism is pretty shocking, especially when the male spider appeared to have committed to inseminating his new partner before he ate her. Carnage, competition, bug sex can be pretty rough. But this is sex after all, something most often considered not awful. Is there any way of knowing if bugs can actually find pleasure with sex? The University of Delaware. In these hallowed halls of higher learning, there's a bug biologist who is really into the sex lives of fruit flies.
Okay, I'll get my flies.
Fruit flies are a popular bug when it comes to science. For decades, they've been the stars of genetic research, partly because they share around 75% of the genes we humans carry around. Also, a male fruit fly's ejaculations are epic. They have incredibly long sperm. In fact, it can be 20 times the size of the little guy's body.
And that's actually related to sexual selection because longer sperm will be stored in the female reproductive organs for a longer time.
But fruit flies are the bug world's most popular lab rats because it's really easy to get them to have sex.
Yeah, she's doing it. Did you see it?
Their short lives are driven by two main things, food and sex, a lot like us.
Of course, we are driven by many other things, but we are still animal, right? We are driven by food and we are driven by sex. They are extremely important for animals' individual survival and the survival of the species. So evolution basically ensures our brain evolves to perceive these important and meaningful stimuli as rewarding.
We don't know anything about the cognitive experience of bugs, really. But if it exists, they should find pleasure in things that allow them to reproduce. If organisms feel pleasure in things that increase their reproductive output, they will do better over evolutionary time. And so pleasure essentially ends up as a tool to evolution.
Where are my virgins? So these are all virgin females. And we have the males separated, isolated in these smaller glass vial. Now I'm going to load the male.
So how do you find out if fruit flies enjoy sex? Leisha was part of a research team that genetically manipulated male flies. They trained them to ejaculate in response to red light. Given the choice, they gather under the light, a fruit fly pleasure palace with orgasms aplenty.
We found that ejaculation is rewarding to males, and that's how the males get the sexual reward. But it's all artificial reward, right? Because we didn't give them anything. We just activate the neuron.
It might be an artificial reward, but don't tell these fruit flies. They're having a great time all by themselves as the red light gives them the green light to ejaculate. But this scenario was fabricated in a lab, and it only partly answered the question about whether the flies feel pleasure or not. So scientists then decided to give the male flies a choice between their two favorite things, sex and alcohol, in that order. Sex is a reward, but if sex doesn't materialize, there's always alcohol to ease the pain of rejection.
Flies' favorite food is alcohol in the fermented fruit. And the males who are rejected by females, they want to elevate their level of reward. So they consume more alcohol after the rejection.
But a male who had successfully mated was not interested in alcohol afterwards. That indicated that all love is not equal, that the males got more enjoyment from sex than they did from booze. But what about the females? Where's the fun for them? As we've already heard with other studies of bugs, much less is known about females because no one seriously looked into their sexual behavior until recently. Studies of male fruit fly behavior date back to the early 1900s.
Systematic study on female courtship behavior, I think, start maybe 2013.
And so that meant that people missed a whole chunk of what was going on in nature. There's a whole world of effects that arise from female reproductive decisions that affect males and that affected the evolution of the traits of entire species, really.
Okay, another adult male. These are all live ones, by the way.
Back in Hawaii, Marlene Zook is combing through the crags of Volcano National Park.
So, John, you ready to start checking them off?
Trying to fill in the many blanks in the story of another bug, the little-known and little-understood lava cricket.
The initial work that was done on them, the conclusion was that these are early colonists that come out on lava after there's been an eruption, and then they disappear after some period of time as the lava gets vegetated. And so obviously, if that's true, then, and they're that kind of transient, then, you know, how are you going to really do a study on them? The second thing, of course, is that they're nocturnal. The third thing is that they don't have any wings, and so you can't hear them. I mean, I'm certainly learning now that, you know, there is a reason why we don't know that much about them. But we know they must mate because we get babies, and there's males and females. But I don't know anything about them. So guess what? It's complicated.
There is so much we don't know. There are potentially sexual behaviors out there in bug world that, if they ever get discovered, will totally challenge our understanding of reproduction and evolution, even more than the ones we already know about. But maybe we make it even more complicated by letting our own perceptions of sex get in the way of what is actually happening in nature.
Perhaps because in humans, reproduction is often cooperative, and that idea has sort of bled into a popular understanding of the evolution of behavior and structures, and is just not true. And that really can be revealed to us through looking at something like insects, where it's all about individual competition to transfer the most genes into the next generation. But sex drives some of the most extreme and rapid adaptations that we've seen in nature, which means that sometimes we can actually document it almost in real time. Like, you can't make it up. You can't make it up.
Remember, there are 10 quintillion bugs on Earth, and we've barely scratched the surface of all the things they get up to.